Hello, I'm talking about Yeonmi Park's second book today. It's called While Time Remains. And this is my first time reading a book by her, but I am quite familiar with her as, someone who is she's a defector from North Korea. That's where she was born. That's where she lived the first 12 years of her life before she fled to China and then eventually made it to South Korea, and now she lives as an American citizen in the US. So I followed there was this really viral speech that she did when she was really young, and I remember watching that and immediately us as a generation were constantly exposed to a lot of people saying a lot of things on TV, but something about the way she spoke really got me hooked. And I think that was the case for a lot of people, because since then she's been in the public eye. She's been trying to spread awareness and talk about how life truly is like in North Korea, but also in general trying to give a very realistic picture of what does it mean to help North Korea and how to go about it, and how people actually show a lot of sympathy, show a lot of interest, but actually a lot of the things that we do might not be very helpful. The last couple of years, maybe I haven't really been that in touch with what she's been up to, but I remember back in the day, maybe the last time I saw anything by her was pre-pandemic. She started a YouTube channel, and I saw that she was doing a couple of videos about the family, that kind of the dictator family from North Korea. So it was quite interesting, I think, her journey. For me personally, I had always this question that, if she managed to escape, even though it was so hard, why doesn't she now just focus her time and effort into just kind of living her life? And she has a son now, so what really drives her to be so active? Whereas I know that there's a lot of defectors that are not like that. They're not living such a public life, and I think this is something that she addresses in the book, that because she's been through so much, she very much feels like she's living in borrowed time, and she finds that anything she does with this time, she wants it to amount to something, and she constantly thinks about all the people that she's left behind who still live the way she used to live, and she can't quite come to terms with the idea of being able to leave that behind in the best way possible. It's not like she's unable to move on, but I think she's very accepting of the kind of life that she's had. In many ways, she's also quite appreciative, and this is how she begins this book. She tries to talk about how, people might be surprised by hearing this, but she's actually quite happy that she grew up, or she was born in North Korea, and the life she's had, because that's made her very intensely appreciative of every single thing that she has now, and also has made her hyper aware of how disillusioned she was when she arrived to America and what she saw there, and by the current kind of climate of things. So I think in general, probably this book was a really interesting read for me. It showed me how much of a critical reader I've become over time. Like, my critical thinking has really shocked me, because I feel like previously I read quite a lot, and a lot of the times I'm either liking or disliking a book, but I think in this case I've never agreed and disagreed at the same time with someone so intensely, because I feel like there are certain aspects of human nature that she's addressed so perfectly, and the things that she's talked about in this book, especially her narrative on how freedom and liberty and these kind of things are very fragile, and this is something that we really need to look after. And we can see in America over the last couple of years, it's really been crumbling, and she finds that really painful to watch, because she's come from a place where those things don't exist and they were taken away from people, and it's looking like it's close to impossible for those people to fight for their freedom back. But in America's case, she can see that people have this freedom, but somehow it's slipping away. So it's kind of like this book almost serves as a warning for the American people that, don't take for granted what you have right now, because it can only be a generation away that it's all taken away from you. So I think that is the premise. I do want to, I've taken a couple of notes because I read the audiobook, and this was not narrated by her. I wish it was, but that's okay. I will read out there's a quote right at the end. I think it's about 15 minutes before the end of the book, but it says, "When people become untethered from history, when they become unshackled from reality, and when they lose the ability to understand cause and effect, they become ripe for exploitation from those who hold real power. And I think this book, this part or this quote probably summarizes the book that better than I can, because there is a bit of a scared, I guess, part of her, which feels like if you look back in history, a lot of the people that lived through the darkest of times are slowly getting old and dying out. And if you think about the current generation, we haven't really had to live through a war or seeing people kind of being shot in front of you. I mean, it depends, obviously, depending on where you live. But in her, the way she's talking about it, they haven't lived through that. And when people haven't really seen real, intense violation of human rights, to them, the violation of human rights means something completely different. And this is where I feel like I somehow hit the road where I don't fully agree with her, because she has a huge issue with the woke movement. And by the woke movement, I mean, you know, this whole expansion of gender pronouns and like white current day feminism. I do think that just because she comes from a place where she's seen a violation of human rights in such a, like, honestly, an ugly way, that for her to come to America and be disillusioned by the fact that, oh my god, like, these people really don't understand what violation truly is, and they say things like, you know, not being called the right pronoun is a violation of their human rights. But I think just because one is more intense than the other doesn't give her the right to completely invalidate a movement that is currently taking place. I myself find parts of this woke movement quite ridiculous, but that doesn't give me the right to say that one is more important than the other. There are different people, and like the current generation, the reason they're becoming so detached from reality is also a big issue that we're facing right now. So to pinpoint these two things and pit them against each other, I think she will lose a lot of people who will really benefit from hearing what she has to say. I think there's a lot of influence. Like, there are these three people she mentions at the end of the book, and honestly, up until that point, I was like yo-yoing between I really fucking love this woman and everything she has to say, to like, oh, I wish we really didn't go there, and I totally disagree. And then at the end, she said she really, like, three people she really looks up to are Jordan B. Peterson, Joe Rogan, and what's her name? I wrote it down. Candace Owens, who I believe is somehow related to Ben Shapiro. I just feel like these three people, first of all, I don't know much about Joe Rogan, I've maybe watched one, but like everyone associated with these people and what's happened over the last couple of years, I find them quite culty and quite like, in a way, dismissive of things that don't fall under their version of like right and wrong or true or false. Very, very opinionated people, very actually, like, I'll move Joe Rogan out of this. I'm talking about Jordan B. Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and I've watched stuff and they're like almost like making fun of society. It's almost like a parody, and they think like there is definitely a hierarchy of whose pain is more important, who is more important to be heard. And I think this is the same issue that I had with Yeonmi, because there's parts of me that feels like there is so much depth and so much story and meaning behind what she's written, that someone reading this book, the moment they hit this part about like what she has to say about the current generation and how she almost looks down upon them, it's a bit condescending. I feel like rather than being able to reach them and meet them in a way and speak to them in a way that they understand, you are dismissing them and mocking them and being slightly condescending, which is not going to get you the support that you really need. So I feel like that's really not a smart way to go about it. Maybe she doesn't really care because currently the people in power are not Gen Zs, but very, very soon, you know, like our generations will die out, and like these people are the people who are going to be sitting in positions of power. And if they feel like things that are said by their you know, people before them have so much contradiction with how they see the world, then they're not going to be very receptive of it. And this is why I feel like people who are so dismissive of the younger generation actually need a little bit of education about these people and their pain and their problem. If Yeonmi thinks that people should be, you know, interested in what she has to say and the pain of the people in North Korea and the pain of the people in, you know, going up in these regimes, then I think she should also be open to understanding the condition that surrounds certain people and why they are, you know, doing certain things. And I'm here in the middle, which I completely agree with her. Some parts of this whole movement is really ridiculous. At the same time, I feel like there's so many parts of this book that do such a good job of making people understand why studying history and studying our own history, not the subject, I'm talking about like really taking an interest in the past and understanding events that have taken in the past, is so important. And had I known this, I feel like I personally would have been more interested in history classes. But honestly, it felt like another version of propaganda, whereas like if you yourself take the time to study historical events and hear different people's perspective about it, you get a very different take on it. I think she does a really good job of explaining why she's so pro kind of capitalism, although, you know, sometimes she comes across almost like a spokesperson for capitalism, someone who's campaigning for it, and almost like another form of propaganda. But she does a really good job of differentiating between leftism and liberalism, and that what a lot of people, you know, identify as being a liberal person are actually then fighting for leftist ideas. And she doesn't say that she's, you know, so for capitalism because it is the best system out there, but from studying all these different versions of society that have, you know, existed in the past, capitalism has been the sole system that has enabled the maximum amount of people to have a fair life, if that makes sense. So you have the socialist kind of society where everyone is earning close to nothing, and then you have like 1%, not even 1%, like literally 0.0001% that's doing incredibly well. Whereas in a capitalist society, there are levels and there is a way to go from one level to another. Not for everyone. Again, there's so many other situations that come into play, but what she's saying is it is the most possible. Whereas in these socialist economies or like societies that have existed, this hasn't been the case. It's already proved that it's already ended in so many kind of catastrophes in the past. So it's mostly like her ideas and her thoughts about this is based upon study of previous societies and not based of her own kind of like, I think this is the best way to do things, which I think is a really good way to go about it. She does say that being in America and living there for this amount of time and hearing what people have to say, sometimes she feels like it's extremely leftist, which can, you know, take away a lot of the rights that people and generations have fought for before the current generation, and that is what she finds so incredibly scary. She feels like a lot of people, a lot of young people are advocating for the destructions of the very rights that they enjoy every single day, like freedom of speech, freedom of right to bear arms, even she mentions, which, oh my god, like, can we just not even talk about that? Some parts that I really hated that she talked about was imagined victimization. Again, that is something that I don't really agree with. Self-made contradictions where people are trying to find issues with their life because there is no real issue. Again, I don't agree with that. Solving problems where there aren't none, when real problems get sidetracked. So people are like, oh, we need to really, you know, let people, I mean, she keeps bringing up this whole thing about pronouns where it's like we need to make sure that we add more pronouns into the mix and everybody says the right thing, rather than dealing with real problems which are happening in the Eastern world and people actually needing help. She does gives a few anecdotes where she's been to different parties, like she was even invited by Jeff Bezos and she was invited to the Met Gala, and how she talked to people there and you were just shocked by how people didn't really seem that interested. I think by far like the best point she made in this book was her point about, she says that the real issue with the world right now is not that people don't want to help North Korea, is that the only real way, sorry, my dog is drinking water, the only real way to help North Korea is by actually dealing or facing the things that they need to face when it comes to China. And I think that's where a lot of people draw the line, and they're like, oh, by the way, like if you ever talk about me in public, don't mention me because I do a lot of work with China. And I think a lot of people, including people at the top, have come to rely on China because of the way the world has progressed. And she's scared that why do we so heavily rely on a country that can very easily take away the very rights that is taken away from North Korean people, which I think, you know, you can see my issue with this book where there's so much good packed in this, but there's also so much I want to say bad, but it's just like so much contradiction happening here. I think she's right in saying that America today represents or has become a parody of its own existence. I honestly think that a lot of this book also shows her own personal disappointment with America, because she obviously moved there thinking that it's all of these things, and it actually just turned out to be a better version, slightly better version of what she left behind. And I think I can feel that. Where moving to the UK, you don't get to see the like dark parts of a country if you don't live in it, and living here I can see it, and this is not parts that it promotes. Like, not everybody speaks like the Queen. There's a lot of issues happening here, and I can say that I kind of relate to her in the way that, like, no place is actually paradise, and now every place has its issues, but I'm not gonna go about it in a way where I basically lecture people here when they themselves don't really have a clear way of kind of going about it. One good example, I guess she gives people on how to deal with it, is to stop kind of relying so heavily on the central government and the central power and take more charge individually. Like, I really agree with her idea, although I myself am like that people have become so individualistic that as long as you're doing okay, you just kind of like hope and pray that all of these political bullshit that's going on is not going to affect you. But at the same time, the only way to really make a difference is to go ahead and get involved in your local community and be part of the community and try to help people as much as possible, so that from the ground up we can build something. But you're not trying to distance yourself from the government and distance yourself from anything political is not the right way. But we are becoming like that because everything we're reading and following on social media and news cycles is really making us lose faith and hope in anything that's kind of like led by the central government, which is really true. I think I agree with her in, you know, the fact that she says that it's a very fragile system and we should be careful about how we go about it. So in general, I think this is a book that I would ask a lot of people to pick up, if not for any other reason, but just it's going to, like, I feel like no matter who picks this up, it's going to leave you in so many contradictions. Like, you're going to be so basically torn. And if that's not the case, then I would love to hear why not, because like that was my personal experience, and I can't think of anyone in the world who would agree 100% to everything in this book, but maybe there are. But that was my experience of reading this. I personally think that I don't know if I'm gonna go ahead and read her first book. I feel like in parts in her speeches I'm very familiar with her story, but I like the way she writes. I might actually go ahead and pick that up. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I hope it made you want to read the book. But yeah, I'll see you next time.